Hi there, Miss White here. Again, this is a continuation of the lecture on cell cycle regulation and cancer. This will be the last one, I promise. We'll be able to finish. And so in this last, in the previous video, we have been looking at tumor suppressor genes, and remembering that those were analogous to a brake pedal in a car. And if mutated, you would lose that function of being able to slow down or stop your car. So, a couple examples. One example that's very well studied is the gene called TP53, which actually codes for the protein called P53. And P53 will become activated when DNA is severely damaged. So that is a really important thing that needs to be noticed in the cell and repaired if possible. However, if it's not able to be repaired, we have learned that the cell needs to take one for the team, basically, and undergo apoptosis so that it prevents that damaged DNA from getting into the next generation. So TP53 is a tumor suppressor gene that when mutated, if someone has a mutated form of P53, that very often is associated with that person developing cancer. Another example is the BRCA genes that code for proteins that repair damaged DNA as well. And so people with mutated forms of those genes have a much higher likelihood of developing cancer because damaged DNA makes it to the next generation. Those mutations accumulate, and the cell continues to replicate even though there is damaged DNA and problems with the cell cycle. So, will problems occur if only one allele is mutated of a tumor suppressor gene? Now, again, remember that body cells, diploid cells, have a complete set of the homologous pairs, one from mom, one from dad, and on each of those chromosomes, you would have an allele, which is a version of the gene that would be similar but not always identical, and it codes for it's related to a similar trait. So if both of these pink here are the tumor suppressor genes and one of them gets mutated, then you are not necessarily going to have problems because there's still a functioning copy on the other chromosome. So remember that if a tumor suppressor gene is mutated, it's a loss of function mutation. Therefore, if you have two things that do the same job and one gets broken, you still have a functional, let's say, brake pedal over here. And so typically you don't get problems when only one allele of a tumor suppressor gene is mutated. You would definitely start to have issues if both of those copies get mutated, because at that point, then you have no functioning brakes in our analogy. Now, some cancers are said to be hereditary, meaning that you may have a mutation in a cell cycle regulation gene, either oncogene or tumor suppressor gene, that you inherit, meaning it's contained in the chromosome set that you received from your mom or your dad. Now, you're not born with cancer, but by having that mutation, the likelihood of you developing cancer is higher. And so that's what we mean by some cancers are hereditary. You have a much higher likelihood because you already contain in your genome one or more of those genetic defects. But remember that cancer is going to result it's going to result from an accumulation of many mutations. Many of these different control systems have to fail, let's say, in order for a person to develop full-blown cancer. So just by having one mutation in one of these genes does not mean that you are doomed. It's going to have to accumulate over many cell divisions and affect many of the different cell cycle regulation genes, which is why lifestyle choices are so important, because some genetic mutations are going to be caused by environmental factors. So UV exposure, getting too many sunburns, that can cause DNA damage. DNA damage results in mutations. If the mutations are in a cell cycle regulation gene, then you're increasing your likelihood of having cell cycle regulation problems. So, certain chemicals, toxins, environmental factors can all cause DNA damage throughout a person's lifetime. And again, if your cells accumulate enough of those mutations such that it loses control of the cell cycle, that's when the problem begins. So I'd like you guys to finish off this lecture packet by thinking about this question. The development of cancer normally involves a combination of environmental factors and an accumulation of genetic mutations. So I'd like you to think about everything we've talked about in this last portion of the lecture and write a nice, thoughtful paragraph answering this question. All right, thank you for joining me. We're done with this lecture packet. Stay tuned for more videos uploaded in the future.